तो चलिए चालू करते हैं। आज हमारा आखिरी सेशन रहेगा इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी पे। नॉर्थ ईस्ट स्टेट्स की बात हो रही थी जिसमें मणिपुर की स्पेसिफिकली बात हो रही थी। कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मेजर्स क्या लिए गए, क्या रीजन था, एथनिक आइडेंटिटी और मल्टीपल ग्रुप्स ओरिजिनेट हुए। इट वाज नॉट लाइक कि यू नीड टू कि तुम आपके पास आपके अगेंस्ट में कोई सिंगल ग्रुप या सिंगल पार्टी है, आपको उसको कर्व करना है, उसको वायलेंस को कर्व करना है। But because of the multiple originality of the groups and along with that multiple problems, so like वो लोग क्या कर रहे थे, आपस में भी लड़ाई चल रही थी उनकी and यूनियन गवर्नमेंट में, and most of the groups were having this ideology कि we need to succeed and we need to get separated, parted away from the India. तो इस पे गवर्नमेंट ने सिक्योरिटी मेजर्स के लिए उसके रिगार्डिंग हम लोग बात कर रहे थे। सो इनिशियली जो पीरियड था, the Manipur was primarily response instrument for fighting insurgencies and restoring order. सबसे पहले तो मणिपुर पुलिस was taking the control of that. हम लोगों ने कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मेजर्स पे देखा कि आफ्सपा को भी डिप्लॉय किया गया था। नाउ इसमें आसाम राइफल्स और सीआरपीएफ, सीएपीएफ, मल्टीपल स्टेट मशीनरीज को भी डिप्लॉय किया गया था। So for example, 1948 में when Mao Nagas raised their demands for the merger of Mao areas with the Naga Hills and the Krishak Sangh under the leadership of Hijam Irabot, started secessionist movement. The Manipur police was called in to tackle the problems. At the time, Manipur integration with Indian Union in 1949, Manipur had only 5 police stations, 7 outposts, 46 officers, 330 constables in civil police and 115 personals in Manipur Rifles. However, the problem of insurgencies and ethnic clashes increased in the province and strength of the state police proved inadequate and government has to borrow additional companies of armed police from the other state. So for example, when Naga insurgencies flared up in the later part of 1956 in the hill areas, in addition to the Manipur Rifles, which was deployed in Tamlong, Mao and Ukhrul subdivisions, the state government borrowed 2 companies of Eastern Rifle from West Bengal and deployed them into Tamlong subdivision. Similarly, 1960s maybe when the clashes between the Kukis and Hamars broke in Churachandrapur, Jiribam, Tamlong subdivisions of Manipur, government deployed the companies of Bihar military police to bring the situation under control. Besides, the Assam Rifle was also deployed in the hills of Manipur to tackle Naga insurgents in the state by 56. And finally, army was deployed in 61 to fight against the Naga rebels operating in Manipur. Now, as there was sustained counter-insurgency, operations against the Naga insurgents by security force and law and order situation began to improve. By half of later 61. The rule of law was established in the affected areas of the state and can be gauged from the fact that general election was conducted successfully in 62 despite the boycott called by the Naga insurgents. In subsequent years, the strength of Manipur Rifles was periodically increased, not continuous, periodically increased. As the result of the forces was successfully in responding to the Naga insurgencies. In addition, village voluntary force raised by the Special Service Bureau in 66. Now, इनका मोटिव क्या था? मोटिव था कि to protect the villages, deprive the support of insurgents, also assist in counter-insurgency operations of Indian Army and Central paramilitary forces. Then these measures contributed immensely in the improving of the security situation in the state. For example, during 68 and 69, because of the effective police action, Ukhrul subdivision was cleared of the insurgents' activities in Mao. Civil administration was restored. During this time, the total of 301 Naga insurgents are surrendered, 439 was captured and 15 were killed in the encounter with police and village volunteer force. The large quantity of arms and ammunition was recovered, included 535 guns and rifles. In 1970s, a large-scale deployment of Indian Army in the eastern part of the country because of the political turmoil in East Pakistan enabled the government to carry out intensive counter-insurgency operations against the Mehdi rebels. As mentioned earlier, the army along with the Assam Rifles were able to crush RGM in its cadre. In 1980s, with the imposition of ASPA in the entire state, the Army, Assam Rifles, CRPF and BSF was deployed to tackle the Meitei insurgencies. The counter-insurgencies operations launched by the security forces were very effective not only in containing the violence but also decimating the insurgent cadres and the leaders. For example, almost all the Chinese trained leaders of the PLA were either captured, killed in two of the encounters. The first encounter happened in 81, which led to the arrest of N. Visheshwar, and second in 82, when his successor, Punja Bihari Singh, was killed. In November 1985, Pripak leader R.K. Tulachandra was killed by Manipur rifles. Counter-insurgency operations picked up again in the state affairs resurgence of militancy at the end of 1980s. The valley-based insurgent groups largely operated in the valley and the hills and the jungles of Chandel districts were where they had set up training camps. However, by the mid 1990s, because of the intense counter-insurgency, some PLA rebels came on the ground and even contested state elections. However, insurgencies in the state got a new flip in 2001 when the Union government implemented a ceasefire agreement with NSCN-IM without territorial limits. This meant that the Manipur hills inhabited by Nagas were covered under the agreement, which was obviously unacceptable by the Nitis and the valley-based groups of insurgents. In the large-scale violence took in the state, in which state assembly building was burned out, hampering government infrastructure. In 2004, following the agitation against the killing of Manorama Devi and withdrawal of the ASPA, the Unified Command structure was constituted in Manipur. The command was headed by the Chief Minister with the representative of Indian Army, Assam Rifle, State Police and Intelligence. The idea was to launch a joint operation of Indian Army and Assam Rifles in the coordination with the State Police to provide a better coordination and more transparency in such operations. In addition, a SOG was also committed under the chairmanship of Chief Secretary along with the representative of Indian Army, Assam Rifles, CRPF, BSF, State Police and Intelligence agencies to assess the security situation in the state and plan a launch and counter-insurgency operations. However, Unified Command and SOG remained in a paper only. This can be ascertained from the fact that there were several counter-insurgency operations which were carried by Indian Army, but the state force rarely participated. For example, 2005 counter-insurgency operations such as Stringer Tornado was launched to flush out the militants from Loktak and Jiribam areas of the state. These operations resulted in the killing of 143 militants and arrest of 306 belonging to UNLF, PLA and Pripak. In the next few years also similar operations were carried out. However, at the look of the operations revealed that those conducted primarily by the Indian Army with the Assam Rifles and Manipur Rifles occasionally participated in the operations. These operations, however, could not make a dent on fighting capacities of the valley-based insurgent. Consequently, additional security forces were deployed in the state over the years. Thus, by November 2009, the number of security forces deployed in the state was Manipur Rifles, Indian Reserve Battalion, 6 Battalion, Civil Police, CRPF, BSF, Army, 10 battalions, Assam Rifle, Home Guards also. All these security forces were mandated to maintain the public order in the state. In addition to the security forces, Manipur also raised VDF in 2008 as an informal layer of surveillance and defense. The volunteer defense force was paid a sum of 8,500 per month, provided with a weapon and tasked with the duties guarding vital installations, road opening duties, public unrest and sentries duties. Despite deploying the large number of security personnel constituting the structure to create a synergies amongst the various security forces engaged in the counter-insurgency operations in the state, the security situation in the state continues to remain in dire. One of the factors of these malaise is the lack of coordination and distrust amongst the security forces. It is argued that while the working relation between the Indian Army and paramilitary and CAPF is good, There is a mutual distrust between the central security forces and the state police forces. The central forces perceive that the state police are corrupt force which enriches itself by collecting the money at the checkpoints or the highways and colludes with the insurgents group. And the state police on their part distrust the central forces are unwilling to cooperate, claiming high-handedness of central forces. And the dynamics of the army deployment and the dynamics of ceasefire SOG agreement also create as a constraint in effectively combating insurgencies operations in the state. In the recent time, as the tension along the Indian-China border escalated, more units of Indian Army were pulled out of the state and redeployed. Even those that are presently deployed in the state are meant for the quick mobilization against the external threat only. They are not mandated to carry counter-insurgency operation. As a result, large gaps are created in the affected areas where there is no security presence to carry out counter-insurgency operations. The withdrawal of Indian Army from the counter-insurgency operation has put the entire responsibility tackling of the insurgent on Assam Rifles. Unfortunately, the force find it difficult to saturate the affected areas and dominate that because of stretched to the maximum. In addition to counter-insurgency duty, the Assam Rifle is also mandated to guard Indian-Myanmar borders. This dual role has affected the operational efficiency of the forces because the challenges of smuggling the drugs, weapons, contrabands, and cross-border movement of the insurgent people are increasing. The Assam Rifle is compelled to deploy more battalion near to the border, leaving the hinterland loosely guarded for the insurgents to fill the vacuum. The attack on the convoy of the Assam Rifles and killing of the commanding officers along with his family 4 Jawans at Singhat subdivisions, Churachandrapur district in November 2021 in case of this point. The poor implementation of ceasefire and SOO agreement also creates confusion and contributes towards the violence in the state. The number of cookies breakaway Meitei insurgents group have entered into the ceasefire and SOO agreement with the union and state government. However, the cadres belonging to the various Cookie-Zomi rebel groups engaged in the fratricidal killing for extortion, kidnapping, interfere in the development program, beside intimidating the masses. Even though the security forces are aware that the crimes are perpetrated by surrendered insurgent group, they do not launch any counter-insurgency operations because of the insurgent group are in SOO. And even when the rebels are apprehended, he claims that he belongs to one of the outfits of SOO agreement. The security forces do not have any other options but to let them free. These cadres also influence the elections to the state legislative assemblies and the ADCs. District Council. In the recently held Legislative Assembly polls, the Kuki had reported to ask the people to vote for BJP after the union government allegedly released around 16 crores of Kuki militants group under SOA agreement. The ceasefire agreement with NSC and IN, NSC and Congo are not extended to Manipur Hills where both Naga rebels outfit are active. As a result, Naga rebel indulge in fratricidal, ethnic killing, extortion, kidnapping with impunity. Safeguard. Organizational problem in the state police in the form of poor morale, indiscipline, absence of dynamic and resolute leadership is the another factor for the failure of successive state governments to combat insurgencies. It is often alleged that the state police are law unto themselves. For example, in 2008, the State Police Department constituted a dedicated special commando unit to tackle the law and order situations, including insurgencies. Now, these commandos comprising of 20 officers, 256 men were selected from the state police pool, were given special training. However, because of the poor leadership, the force reportedly soon deteriorated and even started functioning independently. The police personnel not only indulged in extortion, kidnapping of the petty monetary gains, but also carried several encounters of the rebels as well as innocent people. Arbitrary arrest, detention by the police are also routine features in Manipur, which has alienated the gentle masses. Another factor responsible for the lack of morale and discipline in the police forces is the political interference. This is evident from the following case. In 2002, the personnel of Manipur Rifles refused to go on the transfer posting, arguing that it will dislocate their families. Instead of taking disciplinary actions against the personnel, the state government put on hold of their transfers decrying that indiscipline in the state armed police and the opposition parties has accused the Ibobi Singh government for corruption in transfer and posting in the police personals. In fact, such was the corruptions in the government posting transfer that N. Biren Singh government approved a new transfer and posting policy in 2017 to address the malaise. The policy made it mandatory for every government servant to serve in the hills. It further states any government servants who bring or attempt to bring any political or other external influence to bear upon any authority to further his or her interest in respect of the matters pertaining to the services under the government, including transfers, shall be liable to be severely dealt with, and action may be taken under him or her for the violation of Rule 20 of Civil Services Conduct Act. The political interference can also be observed in arrest of militants. It has been alleged that if an insurgent has a political connection, the police will not arrest him unless the matter is cleared by the political leadership. Such actions rob the police forces in Manipur for its professionalism and dedication to the duty. What was the political measures? How this political aspirations was fulfilled of their leaders. So insurgencies and ethnic tensions are the best resolved through political dialogues and settlement. However, the political leadership in Manipur does not appear to willing to engage with insurgents group to arrive at a political settlement. On one example that can be cited to prove that the argument is claimed by the Chief Minister Bobby Singh that he is not aware of the signing of SOO agreement between Kuki and the Indian Army to cease the hostilities and suspend the operation in August 2005. The Ibobi Singh government was reportedly opposed to the agreement in one of the cabinet meeting in 21st September 2005. It decided not to respond to central direction to accept the army suspensions of the operations with the Kuki groups with further clarification. The state government also decided any arrangement contemplated or finalized for SOO and subsequent negotiation will not be acceptable to the state government if these involve discussion, negotiation about the issues relating to the territorial integrity of the state or adversely affect the interest of its people at any stage or in any way. Now, this stance of a state government reflects the fact that Niti's dominated political establishment is partisan, does not favor any concession either to the Kukis or the Nagas insurgent. It is reported that almost all the ministers, including the chief minister belonging to the dominant Meeti community, espouse the cause of Meeti's insurgents. Such a stance against the political settlement could not be because of the nexus between the political parties and the insurgent group. These linkages have proved to be beneficial for both of the parties as political leaders take the help of the militant group to influence the voters during the elections, and insurgents group exploit their proximity to the political leadership to evade arrest to siphon out development funds. The Ministry of Home Affairs, citing an Indian Army report, stated in Parliament on 25th April 2001 that 5 ministers of Nipamamcha Singh government has linked with the terrorists belonging to NSCNK, PLA, UNLF, KYKL and ZRA. The nexus was quite evident when in November 2002 Kuki rebels were arrested from then Transport Minister Hakut Kepe official residence. They were arrested from Transport Minister's residence. Even the Chief Minister Ibobi Singh paid 50 lakhs and 1 crore to KYKL and RPF respectively, receipts of which were made available to the media also. Being that as it may be, successive state government did try to reach out the insurgents group but did not succeed. In 2001, Chief Minister Radha Binod Koijam offered a unilateral month-long ceasefire commencing 1st March 2001 to 17 outfits in the state. As follow-up to this gesture, 19th March 2001, Governor Ved Marwa announced the setting up of the contact group to liaison with extremist organizations in the state. Unfortunately, these peace overtures of state governments were rejected by the rebels outfit. A new beginning towards ushering in the peace was made in 22nd August 2008 when 23 insurgent outfits, latterly increased to 25, belonging to the Kuki Zo Paiti Hamar group, organized themselves under two umbrellas, KNO and UPF, and signed SOO in with the Union and Manipur government. According to the tripartite agreement, the group agreed to abjure the violence and not engaged in any unlawful activities and agreed to be housed in 13 designated camps which are built away from the major highways. and the international boundary. For the enforcement of the ground rule and the monitoring of the same with the joint monitoring group comprising representatives from state government, CRPF, Assam Rifles and Indian Army deployed in the states of Manipur was constituted. In another significant move to bring the peace in Manipur, many breakaway rebels belonging to KCP Manipur Army KYKL have came together to form the URF, United Revolutionary Front, and entered into the ceasefire agreement with the government of India in 2013. 2017, in an effort to attract more and more rebels to surrender, the Union government increased the monthly stipend of surrender from 4,000 to 8,000, and one time financial grant was hiked to 4 lakhs from 2.5 lakhs. In addition to the ceasefire and CSSO agreement, the KNO and the Naga political groups signed an accord on 10th January 2020 to enter into intertribal conflict by recognizing the history and identity of each other. These agreements have helped in reducing the number of violent incidents to some extent, but Manipur security situations continues to be in grim. One of the reasons of the failure of the union and the state government to conclude a negotiated settlement with these surrendered groups. For example, tripartite talks between union government, state government, KNO, UPF to discuss the political demand of KNO and UPF was held in 15 June 2016, nearly 8 years after signing the agreement. This was followed by 2 or more rounds in 19 October 2016 and 9 August 2017. Both KNO and UPF have submitted their political demand, but no headway could be made because of the disparity in the demands of two outfits. While the KNO demands a separate Kuki state, UPF has insisted of a state within a state under Article 244 of Indian Constitution. While the state government does not seem to give in to the demand of Kuki as its fear that the interest of Meitei communities will be compromised, ironically it blames the union government and the security forces of insincerity as the reason of the failure to conclude a peace settlement. At the same time, to show that it is sensitive to the demands of Kuki groups, the Manipur government on 9 December 2016 carved out Kangpokpi district, which roughly conforms to the boundaries of the proposed Sardar Hill district. This decision is claim will fulfill the long demand of Kuki for separate districts for it. The Kuki groups, however, lament that decision is too little too late. That Meitei-dominated legislative assembly is biased towards the dominant communities and can be observed by how issue relating to the land is handled in the state. The land is a major issue in Manipur and also the source of conflict in the state. The land in the state is managed in a two-way. A customary law in the hill areas, the Manipur Land Revenue and Land Reforms Act of 1960s in the plain areas. Although as a rule that act is not implemented in the hill areas, over the course of time the state has begun to implement the act in the hill areas of the state as well. Such actions by the state have allegedly resulted in the land alienation amongst the tribe people. The fact that ADC do not have a right to legislate on the subject of the land has added to the apprehensions of the tribe people. To make matter worse, 21st August 2015, Manipur government passed 3 contentious bills. These are Protection of Manipur People Bill, Manipur Shops and Establishments Second Amendment Bill, Manipur Land Revenue and Land Reform Seventh Amendment Bill. The passage of the bill in the Legislative Assembly resulted in the widespread violence in the state, especially in the hill areas. The reason for this violence was the perception amongst the tribe people that the bill, especially the Protection of People Manipur People Bill, panders to the sentiments and pressures of the dominant community while undermining the interest of hill people. Now it is alleged that the Bill of Protection of the Manipur people addressed the anxiety and insecurities of the Meitei middle class who feel besieged by the migrants, outsiders, and paved the way for the implementation of inner line permit system in state to regulate the entry of outsider in the state. The bill, however, proved to be detrimental for the tribals because it defines Manipur people, the persons of Manipur whose names are in National Register of Citizens 1951, Census Report of 51, and the Village Directory of 51. And their descendants who have contributed collectively to the social, cultural, and economic life of Manipur. The tribe people argued that since the village chief during 50s were illiterate, they do not keep any record. The census official also hardly visited the hill areas during the time because of the remote location and poor connectivity. As the result, there are no village or census record of the residents of the hill areas. Given the lack of proper documentation in the hill areas, the tribe people will find it difficult to prove that they are natives of Manipur. The fact that these bills were passed without consulting with HAC further reinforces the apprehension of tribes people against the dominant Methi community. Governance situation. In 1921, the Manipur was placed in the ninth in the overall ranking amongst the category of Northeast and Hill states in the Good Governance Index. The index ranks states according to the status of governance. It is revealed that Manipur has registered the high decline of minus 11.2%. Manipur also placed in the bottom of the table amongst its category of the state so far as HDI is concerned. Manipur scores has also declined in the quality of education, retention rate of elementary level, enrollment ratio amongst ST and SCs. Manipur is the ranked lowest in the commerce and industry sector, has registered the higher depth of gross state domestic product. Manipur was adjudged the worst governed state amongst the small states in India by a Bangalore-based public affairs centers in 2021. The assessment was based upon the performance of three categories: equity, growth, and sustainability. In other words, Manipur does not have adequate quality governance, has poorly implemented the five centrally sponsored schemes, which have direct effect on the quality of life of the people, especially those residing in the rural areas such as Manrega, NRHM, ICDS, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, and MMS. Niti Aayog Sustainable Development Goals Index ranks Manipur at the lowest in the recent work and economic growth. One of the reasons for Manipur to perform so badly on the governance index is the fact of a state is riddled with the corruption. Corruption is the reality and open secret in Manipur. As is evident, corruption has resulted not only in the failure of governance but also increased in the magnitudes of scams in the state. One of the biggest scam was siphoning of the allowances and dues amounting to crores of rupees from Manipur Rifles personals during 1966 and 98 by top officials. The public distribution rice scam in 2013, the scam over Lokta Creek and Mapital Dam also are the other example of widespread spread corruptions in the state. Such is the extent of the corruption in the state, like tankers carrying petrol, diesel, kerosene were diverted from the big authorized dealers and sold in the black market by the major underground groups. These insurgent groups also diverted rice from the public distribution system from all the dealers, which was part taken from the supplies of the underground camps. Rice, kerosene, petrol, diesels were also sold in black market. Against the quota of 5 liters per family per month of kerosene oil, most people were only getting 2 liters in Imphal. While the interior towns, there was no penetration of PDS supply at all. On the top of it, the state government rates either does not run or it's very tenuous in the insurgency affected areas. The aspect can be gauged from the fact that the militant organizations continues to exact the taxes from the resident of the state. Initially, the militant groups extorted money from the politicians, top bureaucrats and businessmen, but later on, all salaried persons were asked to pay the taxes. In fact, 90s, the entire system of extortion has become institutionalized, with the cashiers of different government departments were directed to deduct certain percentage according to the ranks of the officials and pay the amount to the underground organizations. According to the media report, the tax imposed by the militants ranges from 5% of the small farmers or petty traders to 12 to 15% of the senior officials or an affluent businessman. And on the top of this, 15 to 20% of outlay of any project, even a small road repairing works, goes to the militant pockets. Every time that's sold in Manipur is taxed by a militant. The militant groups also issued decrees dictating that the masses to abide by them or face consequences. These decrees ranges from banning of the sales and consumption of liquors and drugs, banning screening of movies, banning government doctors from working in the private clinics, dictating peoples to wearing traditional local dresses. The militants have also succeeded in muzzling the voice of the civil society, lest they raise their voice against the taxation and the degree. The fact that militants can operate in the state with such immunity is because of the political patronage. As mentioned earlier, several political parties in the state, including the national parties, have close connection with the various insurgents groups. Manipur receives huge fund for fighting militancies, but most of the funds are siphoned by the politicians, bureaucrats, police officers, and even high ups in the armies and paramilitary forces. Beside the militant groups, in fact, it is being argued that the militancy in Manipur is allowed to be flourish because one its end. Not only with funds dry up, but there will be clamor for development transparency in the government issues that do not suit politician, bureaucrat, and security forces. Summary. Now, as Manipur is plunged into the cycle of violence since communist rebellion from 48 to 52, while the communist rebellion was called off, it did create a ground of future insurgencies to take root. That perceived humiliation felt by the collective communities after the merger of kingdom and granting of statehood to the Naga triggered Methi insurgencies in the state. Beside the Methi separatist movement, the Nagas and Kukis who inhabited the hill of Manipur have also been given up arms against not only the Indian state but also each other. The union and state government have been trying to address the grievances of the people by implementing various constitutional and political security measures towards this, and the granting of statehood as well as general amnesty to Methi rebels had to some extent assuaged means relief the hurt sentiment of Metis, but those were not enough. Similarly, to safeguard the interest of Nagas, Kuki Union government bestowed ST status on them, reserved seats for them in the state assembly as well as in the parliament. It is also provided for setting up ADCs in the Hir area council within the state assembly for venting all law affecting these hilly areas. However, the refusal of major Methi rebels group to give up their separatist demands, enter into the political dialogue with the union and the state government is a major hindrance to the peace in the state. Moreover, it appears that the successive state governments dominated by the Methi communities have not been keen on arriving on a political settlement with the Methi rebels who most espouse the rebel cause. Furthermore, the political dominant Methi leaders do not want to give the genuine demand of Naga and Kukis, which they perceive will jeopardize the territorial unity of the state. In the absence of common meeting ground amongst these three communities, the absence of effective and inclusive government violence continues to persist, making peace elusive to the Manipur. Tomorrow we'll be coming at the end conclusion and this book will get completed. Let's have a question of a day. Now it's a practice. Compile the acts for Indian security forces and read it thoroughly. How many armed forces are there in India? Through what act they got created, under what ministry they functions, and what kind of special allowances they have. These things you have to compile. The acts of Indian security forces, armed forces, numbers of armed forces, their act, which ministries they belong, and what is the special allowances. This thing you will be doing, and therefore our internal security sessions is going to come up at the end with the last episode yet to be come.